Hello and welcome to a new video. Vow of the Disciple has been out for a little while and every single one of the big YouTubers has made a guide about how to do it. That's not why I'm here today. Today, I want to go over my specific loadouts that I use as a Titan main on Destiny. To start off with, when you load into the entrance of the raid, it's the same as the mission preservation. The main thing you want is ad clear. Now, I have personally found that Trinity Ghoul is my favorite exotic to use in this encounter. My other two legendary weapons that I use are something that uses special ammo like a sniper, just so I can hit those abominations if I want to, and a Palmyra, again, just for the exact same thing to hit those abominations. Aside from that, I use Void 3.0 with Inmost Light, all those different mods that I've gone over before. You guys should be pretty familiar with that style. Basically what you're looking for if you're running the same setup that I am is you want to have as much uptime of Lightning Rod that you can. Lightning Rod is obviously the exotic perk that Trinity Ghoul gets once you get a kill with any sort of arc damage that allows you to get some really nice AoE damage, which basically means that you don't even have to aim the bow very accurately in order to get a bunch of kills. This weapon is much better with the Catalyst, making Lightning Rod have that ability to do it after every single arc kill. Otherwise, it is a little bit harder to maintain that Lightning Rod energy. You can obtain the Catalyst for this weapon in any playlist activity. I personally have found the most Catalysts running strikes, and then typically what I have done, like in my last video, is run Altars of Sorrow in order to farm out those kills. Moving on to the first encounter, the Obelisk encounter, the only major change that I make in this is I switch out my Silicon Aroma or your special weapon in the kinetic slot for a weapon that is able to get an unstoppable shot. Again, this is pretty self-explanatory, but there are unstoppable ogres that spawn. I don't want to rely on a teammate to be able to stun them because sometimes that can get you in trouble if you need to rely on somebody else to stop an unstoppable. So I run myself, but I will mainly be using Trinity Ghoul, Palmyra again, just for those unstoppable champions, and then I run Void 3.0 because in a pinch, if you really need to, you can throw your melee or you can throw your vortex grenade, and that can wipe out basically any sort of enemy that is there. Sometimes I time it with callouts that I have to do to make it a little bit easier and I don't have to watch things as much, but you should not have very many problems at all when you're running Trinity Ghoul on this setup. The armor here doesn't change either. It's all Void 3.0 with the Heart of Inmost Light, the exact same setup that I had before. Things to keep in mind when you're running in this setup: the 2 yellow health bar adherents that spawn, the Scorn adherents with the shields, they can be tough to hit with Trinity Ghoul. They can be tough to hit in general just because their shield seems to have a weird hitbox that prevents them from getting hit from a lot of different angles. What I try to do is I try to make sure the majority of the enemies that are spawning during this encounter are taken care of with Trinity Ghoul first, and then I try to go after the adherents. Sometimes it works so well that everything kind of spawns in the same area and they're basically dead anyways. Another thing that I will do, if I have a grenade or a melee stored up that I haven't had to use or anything, I haven't gotten in a bad spot, I will use it here just to make sure that those guys aren't able to reach the Obelisk in time and get those kills rather easily. Aside from that, that is pretty self-explanatory. If you are a runner in this situation, I can see some benefit to being able to run an Eager Edge Sword just to be able to fling yourself across the map a little bit faster. Maybe run a true Void 3.0 build with Funnel Web so you can get that little bit of extra movement speed from, like, Killing Wind, Perpetual Motion, that sort of stuff. If you wanted that, I have done running in this setup before. It is completely fine. Instead of using your Palmyra on the unstoppable champions, you will be using it on the Glyph Keepers that are inside all of the different areas, and you can very easily kill those with one rocket. Doesn't take very much. Moving on to Caretaker, the only thing you should be worried about in this encounter is damage. That means whether you are ad clearing, whether you are stunning Caretaker, or running the glyphs themselves and putting it into the Obelisk, I recommend that you run a damage loadout. The one thing for Titan specifically that doesn't work here is Thunder Crash, because you do have to be standing on the plate to be able to do any damage in the first place. Me and my team have done quite a few Caretaker runs, and the only time that we have ever killed ourselves using our own rockets was when we hit each other, so we have no problem using that. Typically what I do is I get somebody else on my team. They will be running Divinity and Galahorn so that we get the extra 30% damage from Divinity, and then Galahorn gives all legendary rockets Wolfpack rounds, and then everybody else will be running legendary rockets along with whatever else they need. Personally for me, I like to run the Palmier that I built with auto-loading holster and lasting impression along with Izanagi's, so that I can just shoot a rocket, swap to Izanagi's, shoot, reload, swap back to my rocket, and it's already ready to go. There are a lot of different damage exotics. You use what you feel best. I will have something later on in the video illustrating how I was able to get the most damage in Relic with this exact same setup, minus the Void 3.0 part. Things to keep in mind in this encounter: if you are ad clearing, you will probably want a longer range gun than what I have here, just because of the fact that as you scale up and go up with Caretaker during the encounter, typically your enemies get farther and farther away from you, so you need to have that extra range in order to do adequate damage to all of the ads that are underneath your umbrella of protection. For me though, specifically because I was running glyphs, I didn't have to worry about the range. I'm barely killing any ads anyways, and any that I do will just be around the Obelisk, so I have no problem running that, and I'd rather have the funnel web to be able to deal with those enemies and stick with my existing damage setup. Moving on to the jump puzzle now. This is not necessarily a requirement by any means. You can do this jump puzzle with barely changing anything, in my opinion. I don't even think that you necessarily need to put on high lift in order to do it, but personally I randomly got a drop in this raid of lion rampants, so I decided just to use them. I was making the video anyway, so helpful exotics for the jumping puzzle would obviously be Lion's Rampants, and I also turn on high lift instead of my usual strafe lift that I run on my subclass. This setup effectively gives me the benefits of high lift, but then Lion Rampants obviously allow you more directional control, so you don't have to worry too much about those really hard spots where you have to make a tight corner around with a Titan. Titans and Warlocks have a really tough time with those just because of the nature of their jump ability. The other thing that you can choose to equip in this that will make your life a little bit easier is an eager edge sword, being able to dash backwards rather quickly. There's not much more to say about the jumping puzzle. You kind of just work through it, and there's guides on how to do it properly on every other single channel, so I won't spend any more time here talking about it. Moving on to the Relic encounter. This is probably where I could see the most variation in exotics and guns that you want to use, including the subclass change. What you're looking for in this encounter is specifically ad clear. You aren't going to be doing a lot of damage to really anything. There's only a couple yellow health bar enemies that you really have to worry about. The two main things that you do want to worry about are overload champions, as well as, just like I said before, ad clear weapons. Personally here, I prefer to run Galahorn. The main reason for that is because the enemies in this encounter are typically grouped up into really tight areas and all in one place. You could use things like Wither Horde if you wanted to, or you could even go back to Trinity Ghoul. Personally, I have found that Galahorn works best because it can one-shot a lot of the overload champions, it can one-shot the glyph keepers, and it can really do so good when you're talking about ad clear. Like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can run here. Obviously, I'm not running Void 3.0, but I have a funnel web in there. I have a sniper rifle in there if I really need to. I don't think I even swapped to the sniper rifle at all. My main things that I used for the ad clear were funnel web, Galahorn, and the stasis subclass. In terms of armor, I also swapped over to the Heart of Inmost Light again, just because that's my favorite armor exotic at the moment. Things to keep in mind in this encounter: there aren't too many, like I said before, just the overload and the glyph keepers. Make sure that you aren't stacking all on one side so that you kind of have a split of all the relics and the people that are actually using weapons throughout the entire encounter. Make sure that you split up your team effectively so you can get through it as fast as possible. And in my opinion, the only real challenge that comes out of this Relic encounter comes from the second full room of enemies, so just be careful about that. You'll see the route that I take here, that I take every single time that I go. The only time that I ever died in this encounter was either wiping because we ran out of time, and that's for a few different reasons, or Pervading Darkness ended up getting me before I was cleansed, so a couple different reasons there. I probably could have saved myself a few of those times, but for the most part, it wasn't due to the ads, which is the worst way to die, in my opinion. Moving on to the big bad Relic, the final boss of the raid. So we can revert back to our existing damage subclass where I have the Palmyra with auto-loading holster and lasting impression. I swap to Izanagi's, and then I have Funnel Web. You could swap this out for a longer range gun just because depending on what role you're playing on it, it may end up being okay. If you're like doing ad clear, for example, it may benefit you to go to like a pulse rifle maybe, or a scout rifle, just to hit those enemies from farther away. But I prefer Funnel Web. I was just splitting the buff, so I didn't need any sort of range to hit any sort of enemies. The only changes that I made for my Caretaker loadout that is different here are that I switched, instead of using Heart of Inmost Light, I used Curious of the Falling Star, and then I used Thunder Crash. You'll see some damage come up. I'll show you some damage phases. And at the end of this, I wanted to show you this encounter specifically because it outlines specific damage numbers. We did end up wiping because of a few mistakes that my team made, just a few communication mistakes, but it does outline the amount of damage that you can push out. There were people on my team using Galahorn. There was obviously one person using Divinity. But aside from that, this is a pretty good example of what kind of damage you can output with a Palmyra with these perks on it, as well as Izanagi's and Thunder Crash. A few things to keep in mind in this encounter is make sure you use your Thunder Crash that you get from rallying to the flag on the first damage phase of Relic. This should make it that you get your super back by the tail end of the second damage phase, and if you end up pushing him into last end, you may get an extra Thunder Crash there, or at the very least you will get it on the third phase, which means you'll have it for last end anyways. Another thing to keep in mind if you are splitting the buff but aren't using the exact same weapons that I am, is I have found that splitting the buff using a sniper rifle to be the most effective in actually splitting it between everybody. It gets the job done faster, and I haven't found a sniper that I regularly use that isn't able to one-shot those crystals. The other thing that I do here is do a little bit of mod swapping for some of my armor. I will swap my Void 3.0 stuff, some of it anyway, so I don't have to go through changing all of my armor back, but put in, 3 different Charge with Light mods, something to give you Charge with Light, something to pass it on to your fellow teammates, and something to increase your damage. So that if you are able to get Charge with Light from the boss, it actually does do a significant damage increase. For example, I think I was doing like 125,000 damage per Honed Edge shot with Izanagi's, but once I had the Charge with Light buff, it ended up going up to 151,000 damage, so it is a significant damage increase. So if you can get everybody on your team to run Charge with Light and run the mods kind of like Powerful Friends, getting the Charge with Light from the orbs, and using High Energy Fire. The main one that you want to make sure you have is High Energy Fire on. If you have that, and some people have Powerful Friends, it's not going to be a big deal. But that is roughly a 20% increase, plus if you're using Divinity and Galahorn, again, like my team was here, it can make for a very, very easy Relic fight. And as you can see on this end card here, my damage was 1.9 million, almost 2 million. If you're paying attention to the damage phase, I did make some mistakes where it cost me a little bit of DPS, but the amount of damage that I was able to do with Thunder Crash and swapping between Palmyra and Izanagi's is almost unparalleled compared to what the other guys were able to do here. Keeping in mind that Firefox in the team here was using Divinity, so he's not going to get a great amount of damage either way. I know for a fact that Nitro and Cold Side of the Pillow, they were using Galahorn throughout the entire encounter, so this can stack up to damage numbers such as Galahorn when you were talking about swapping between these two. Even if you account for the Thunder Crash damage in between there, it is still quite a bit more that you were getting from Palmyra and Izanagi's. Apparently they did miss some rockets and everything, but it is quite a bit of DPS that you can push out without having to run Galahorn. That is it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any other loadouts that you want me to look at, or you want me to do a video on, I'd love to hear about your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you run in Relic and the entire raid as a whole. Let me know in the comments down below, and I hope that whatever you're doing today, you're having fun. See ya!